Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world you might think you know. Mud walls, flickering rush lights, and air thick with the smell of damp straw, and something older, something almost sacred. But you're not here as yourself. Not tonight. Tonight, you've just arrived in this world for the very first time. You're smaller than you've ever been, your skin raw from birth, your mouth searching for air you don't yet trust. You lie on a straw-stuffed pallet that sags under your mother's weight. She's exhausted, her breath ragged, her eyes fixed on the dark beams overhead, as if looking for permission to rest. A sheep bleats somewhere near the hearth, and the chickens flutter inside their wicker basket, offended by your first thin cry. The sound you make doesn't feel like living. It feels like asking, "Please, let me stay." Your mother doesn't smile. She presses your slick body to her chest and whispers words that are more plea than praise. She's begging for your life, for your health, for the chance to see you grow old enough to need shoes. Because here, in this time, surviving isn't a given. It's a daily negotiation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop me a comment. Where are you watching from tonight? What time is it where you are? I love seeing this little community map light up. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cottage is a single room. A fire sputters in a shallow stone circle, smoke curling up until it settles against the thatch above you. Your first breath tastes of soot and sour milk. Your father stands near the door, his expression unreadable. You are not the son he hoped for. You are a burden, a tiny mouth, another dowry he cannot afford. He steps outside without a word. Historians still argue whether medieval fathers felt tenderness in these moments or only calculation. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe nothing at all. A quirky tidbit. Some families hung dried rowan branches over the threshold when a child was born, believing it would drive away spirits jealous of new life. Above your head, a little bundle of twigs dangles from a bit of frayed cord. It sways with every draft. A small, uncertain guard. Days pass. You learn the timbre of the house, the creak of the bench, the hiss of wet logs, the way your siblings' voices rise and fall like birds in the rafters. Your mother carries you against her chest, the rough linen rubbing your cheek. She bends to stir the pot, to haul water, to chase the chickens back inside when the wind grows sharp. You cling to her heartbeat like it's the only promise the world has offered you. By the time you can crawl, you understand that silence is safer, that crying only empties your body of energy you can't afford to lose. You learn to watch your father's hands, to measure whether he's been drinking or simply tired. You learn that bread crusts are precious and that hunger is a constant companion. Historians still debate whether peasant children knew they were poor. You don't think you'd have words for it yet. You just know that life is a narrow corridor, and you are learning to walk it without stumbling. Your first toy is a carved stick, smoothed by your mother's thumb. Your first lesson is how to stay out of the way. Your first injury comes when you press your palm against the iron pot, curious about the heat. The blister throbs for days, and no one fusses over you. There's no room for fragility here. But there is, sometimes, a kind of rough grace. Quirky fact: in some villages, Mothers sang in dialects no priest would bother to learn, lullabies that mixed prayers with warnings. You hear them every night as you drift towards sleep. Your mother's voice thin, but steady. By the time you are 5, you have outlived more than half of the babies baptized alongside you. When you walk past the churchyard, your mother's hand tightens around yours. She doesn't explain the little mounds of dirt, the splinters of wood with no names. She doesn't have to. You understand that life here is always borrowed. You don't know yet that you will grow older. You don't know that you will become another set of hands stirring the pot, another quiet shape in the shadows of this same cottage. For now, you only know that you are alive, and that some mornings, when the fire catches and your mother hums, that feels like enough. The wind rattles the shutters, and you turn your face toward it, curious. You don't cry. You don't speak. You are simply here, wrapped in linen, held together by the stubborn will of a woman who has already given more than she ever planned. And in this moment, you survive. You rise before the sun most days now, your breath making little ghosts in the chill air as you shiver yourself awake. No one calls this childhood. Not really. You don't have time to think about whether you like your chores. You simply do them because you've seen what happens to children who don't. You start your mornings by poking at the embers in the hearth until they yawn into flames again. The smoke stings your eyes, but you've learned not to rub them with dirty hands. Your first task is always small: fetching kindling, shooing the chickens off the table, checking the straw mattress for fleas. But even these tiny jobs feel important. Like each one proves you belong here. Your mother shows you how to sweep the floor in tight, practiced strokes that don't kick up too much dust. You copy her movements until your shoulders ache. You don't expect praise. You've learned that survival is its own reward. Outside, the village stirs and fits and starts. You hear the lowing of the neighbor's cow, the slap of laundry against a cold stream rock. A woman calls her children in a voice you recognize, half love, half threat. Historians still argue whether medieval children were treated with affection or just tolerated as necessary mouths to feed. You suspect the truth is messier. Some days, you are treasured. Other days, you're simply another burden to haul through dawn. By 6 or 7, who's counting, you can carry a bucket of water without spilling it more than twice. You know how to grind barley between stones until your wrists burn. How to scrape soot off the pot without complaining. One morning, your mother hands you a ball of raw wool and shows you how to twist it between your fingers into a thin, lumpy thread. It snaps over and over, but you keep trying. Not because you think you'll get it right, but because you've already learned that trying is not optional. You notice how the men gather near the well, voices pitched low over cracked mugs. They never look your way. The boys your age are allowed to run, to climb trees and shove each other into puddles. You envy them a little, though you'd never say so aloud. The girls stay close to the hearth, eyes cast down, hands always busy. You watch the older ones, noting how they measure flour by sight, how they shape dough without wasting a crumb. Quirky tidbit. In some villages, girls were given small cloth charms sewn with herbs to wear under their clothes, protection against envy, or the evil eye. You have one, stitched by your grandmother. its edges fraying. When you're nervous, you rub it between your thumb and finger, as though it can conjure courage out of thin air. Your father doesn't say much to you. When he does, it's usually a barked instruction or a sigh, heavy enough to crush your chest. You don't resent him, exactly. You've simply accepted that he's tired in a way that no sleep will ever fix. He returns each evening, smelling of mud and sweat, and you learn to read the lines in his face before he speaks. If the furrow above his nose is deep, you keep quiet. If his eyes are dull, you keep out of reach. One afternoon, you're trusted to stir the pot yourself. The porridge inside is more water than grain, but it feels like power to hold the wooden spoon. You lean over the pot, watching the surface bubble in slow, reluctant blips. When your mother isn't looking, you dip a fingertip in, hoping for a taste. The burn sears your skin, and you bite back a yelp. You will not cry. Crying is for babies, and you're not a baby anymore. That night, you curl on the straw mattress with your burned finger tucked against your belly. The pain throbs in time with your heartbeat. But beneath it, there's a strange pride. You've learned something, even if it hurt. Historians still argue whether medieval girls internalized this constant labor as duty or despair. Maybe both, maybe neither. You suspect it's simpler than that. You work because you must, because the alternative is hunger or worse, a disappointment that clings to your skin like smoke. One morning, your mother braids your hair with quick, deft motions. Her fingers smell of onions and tallow. You sit still, watching the dust motes spin in the sunbeam that slants through the roof. When she finishes, she rests her hand on your shoulder, just long enough for you to feel it. Then she's gone, already halfway to the yard with a pail. You sit a moment longer, breathing in the hush she left behind. You are small, but you are not powerless. You are young, but you are already necessary. The first time you help slaughter a chicken, your hands shake so badly you nearly drop the knife. Your uncle laughs from the doorway. He tells you to grip tighter, to look away when the life leaves its eyes. You do as you're told, but later, while scrubbing the blood from your skin, you feel something shift inside you, like a door closing. That night, you dream of feathers drifting through darkness, of a soft clucking that doesn't quite fade. In the morning, you pretend you don't remember. Your tasks multiply as the days stretch toward winter. You learn to mend socks, to patch holes in the thatch roof, to count eggs without losing track. Each job becomes a piece of who you are, stitched together with every small surrender. When the first snow falls, you stand in the doorway, watching flakes melt on your outstretched palm. You feel both wonder and dread, because snow is beautiful, but it also means months of hunger and darkness. Still, you turn back inside. You bank the fire, check the pot, smooth the blankets. You do what needs doing, and you survive. You wake to the hush that always comes after a heavy snowfall, the kind of silence that presses against your chest until your breath feels too loud. The fire is nearly out. You crawl from under the blanket and stir the embers back to life. The first flickers of flame catch on the kindling, and you sigh, feeling like you've accomplished something before the sun has even touched the sky. By now, you are old enough that no one bothers to call you a child anymore. You're simply another pair of hands. You rise when your mother rises. You carry water until your shoulders feel like they might crack. You sweep, you mend, you scrub. And in all those tasks, you learn the secret rhythm of survival, how to keep moving even when your body begs you to stop. Historians still argue whether medieval girls saw this work as oppression or simply life. You suspect it doesn't matter. You don't question the tasks because questioning is a luxury no one has taught you to afford. Your father barely glances at you now, not out of malice. More, because you've shifted into something he doesn't quite know what to do with. You're not small enough to dote on, not old enough to respect. You are in between. And in between is an uncomfortable place to be. One morning, you catch your reflection in the water bucket. Your face has changed, though you can't say exactly how. Your cheeks look sharper, your eyes more watchful. You tilt your head, studying yourself the way your mother studies a bruised apple, deciding if it's still good enough to keep. Your chores take on new urgency as the days shorten. The last of the onions hang from the rafters, and every meal feels thinner than the one before. You learn to stretch scraps into stew, to boil bones until they surrender every whisper of nourishment. Sometimes you catch your mother watching you, her mouth pressed into a line. You don't ask what she's thinking. You already know. Quirky tidbit? Some families nailed iron shears above doorways to ward off witches. You have a pair, rusted and dull, hanging beside the rowan twig. Whether they work is anyone's guess, but you feel a little safer with them there. Your body changes before you feel ready. Your hips soften. Your chest rises under your shift. You notice how men look at you now, like they're trying to decide something. Your mother notices too. She starts brushing your hair more carefully, pinning it higher on your head. She teaches you to walk with your eyes down, to keep your voice low. You don't understand all the reasons, but you understand the warning in her silence. You bleed for the first time. On a morning so cold, you can see your breath inside the cottage. At first, you think you've been cut. You stare at the dark stain on your shift, your heart hammering. Your mother finds you like that, frozen, ashamed. She doesn't scold you. She just nods, as though she's been expecting this. She hands you a rag and a cup of water. You're a woman now, she says quietly. You're not sure what that means, but it feels less like a triumph and more like a sentence. Historians still argue whether medieval girls were prepared for this moment or simply left to figure it out alone. You suspect most of them were, like you, given just enough information to keep going, but not enough to understand why everything felt heavier. The village women start to watch you differently. The baker's wife purses her lips when you pass. The old woman who sells onions gives you a look you can't name. Pity, maybe, or envy, or both. You wish you could disappear, slip back into the safety of being small and unnoticed. But you can't. One evening, while combing lice from your sister's hair, you listen to your mother and aunt talk in low voices by the hearth. Words drift toward you. Betrothal, dowry, good match. You hold your breath. You are 12, maybe 13, but you understand enough to know that your life is about to change again. Your first suitor arrives on a morning when the frost clings to every blade of grass. He is older than your father, with a beard that smells of stale beer. He doesn't look at you, not really. Just your hands, your hips, the way you pour water. You don't speak. You don't dare. After he leaves, you sit outside on the chopping block and watch the sun climb over the thatch roofs. You feel like something important has ended, though you can't say exactly what. You press your palms to your cheeks, willing them to stay dry. Crying won't change anything. Later that night, your mother braids your hair tighter than she ever has before. You wince, but you don't complain. She hums a lullaby in a voice so thin it almost breaks. You know better than to ask what she's thinking. You just close your eyes and pretend you are somewhere else. Somewhere warm and safe, where no one is weighing your worth like a sack of grain. Quirky fact: in some villages, girls were promised in marriage before their first blood. Fathers believed it secured a better price. Your mother waited, but you can't decide if that feels better or worse. When you lie down to sleep, your body feels foreign. Your thoughts feel too big for your skull. You listen to your sister's breathing and wonder if she will grow up faster than she wants to. In the darkness, you promise yourself that whatever comes next, you will endure. You don't have to like it, but you will survive it. Because in this world, that's all anyone expects of you. You wake to the scrape of your mother's spoon against the bottom of the porridge pot, the hollow, tired rhythm of a meal stretched too far. The morning light falls in dusty stripes across the floorboards. Your body aches in a new way, like your bones are being hollowed out to make room for something you didn't ask for. Your betrothal is no longer a rumor. It's a fact that lives in every corner of your home, in the way your father won't meet your eyes, in the way your mother smooths her apron again and again. You don't remember agreeing to anything, but your agreement was never required. Your suitor returns a week later. This time, he brings gifts: 3 goats, a barrel of barley, a length of cloth dyed a muddy red. You watch from the doorway as your father runs his hand along the goats' spines, nodding in solemn approval. You are not mentioned by name. You are just part of the trade. Historians still argue whether medieval brides felt pride in these arrangements or only resignation. You wish you knew. You wish you felt something clear and sharp instead of this heavy blur that settles behind your ribs. The wedding is set for midsummer. No one asks if that suits you. Your mother starts sewing a new shift out of the red cloth. She works at night, her fingers pricked raw, the fabric stiff under the needle. You try to help, but she waves you off. Rest while you can, she murmurs. The words feel like a warning. Quirky tidbit: in some villages, brides carried bundles of herbs in their skirts, part charm, part fumigation, because weddings rarely smelled sweet. You wonder if that will be you, clutching a fistful of rosemary to hide the stink of fear. The morning of the ceremony dawns hot and merciless. The cottage feels smaller than ever. You sit on the edge of your bed, hands folded, listening to your sister weep in the next room. She is too young to understand what marriage means, but old enough to know it takes you away. Your mother braids your hair in silence. When she finishes, she presses her forehead to yours, just for a moment. You think she might say something, some last scrap of comfort or advice, but she only breathes out slowly, as if letting you go is the hardest work she's ever done. The church is cool and dim, the air thick with incense that makes your stomach twist. You walk the aisle like someone moving underwater. Your suitor waits at the altar, expressionless. When he takes your hand, his skin is dry and hot. You want to pull away, but you don't. You stand still, You endure. Historians still argue whether medieval weddings were joyful or merely transactional. To you, it feels like standing at the edge of a pit and stepping in because everyone expects it. The vows are spoken. The priest drones on about obedience and duty. You feel the words settle over you like a net. You catch your mother's eye, but she looks away. Later, you will remember that as the moment when the last piece of your girlhood slipped out of reach. The feast is small and dusty, like everything else in your life. Someone gives you a comb carved from bone. Someone else presses a round loaf of bread into your hands. You say thank you because you're supposed to. You don't taste anything. Quirky fact: in some regions, newlyweds were paraded through the village to prove the marriage was legitimate. You are grateful, in a quiet, bitter way, that your village is too poor for such spectacles. By nightfall, you're in a stranger's house. It smells of old rushes and sour beer. Your husband, because that is what he is now, shows you where everything is with a kind of grim efficiency. The bed, the hearth, the bucket. He doesn't touch you. Not yet. But you feel the expectation in the way he glances at you, then away. Your first night as a wife is spent staring at the rafters, counting your breaths. You tell yourself you will not cry. You fail. Historians still debate whether marriage was a protection or a prison for women in your time. You suspect it can be both. You suspect you will spend years learning which one yours will be. The next morning, you rise before dawn. You stoke the fire, sweep the floor, knead dough that tastes of salt and surrender. No one tells you you've done well. No one tells you anything at all. Your mother-in-law appears before midday. She is taller than you expected, her face set in a line you've already learned not to challenge. She inspects your work, her eyes missing nothing. When she leaves, she gives you a small silver brooch shaped like a swan. To remind you, she says. You don't ask what of. You learn quickly. You learn where the good knives are kept, which cupboard creaks, how to move quietly so the baby in the next room doesn't wake. You learn your husband's moods, how to recognize the tension in his jaw that means you should keep your head down. You learn that you can feel alone, even when someone is breathing beside you. Quirky tidbit? Some women believed a sprig of rue pinned under a mattress would keep a marriage peaceful. You think about trying it. You decide it's easier not to hope. At night, you lie awake, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. You imagine your old home, the low ceiling, the smoky air, your mother's hand on your hair. You wonder if she's thinking of you. You wonder if she feels relief or sorrow. You close your eyes and promise yourself that somehow you will survive this too. You wake before dawn, because that's when wives are supposed to. You sit on the edge of a bed that still doesn't smell like yours, with sheets stiff from lye soap and a hollow space where comfort should be. You dress in silence, pulling your hair back with fingers that already ache. When you pass the hearth, you touch the swan-shaped brooch your mother-in-law gave you. You don't know if it's meant as a kindness or a reminder that you are watched. The days settle into a rhythm that feels more like surrender than routine. You stoke the fire until your knuckles crack, feed the chickens, knead dough until your arms shake. You memorize the squeak of each floorboard, the slope of each threshold. Your hands learn to move without asking your head for permission. If you stop to think too long, everything starts to feel too big, too sharp. Historians still argue whether medieval wives felt pride in their households or only exhaustion. You suspect the truth is simpler. There's no time to feel much of anything when every day starts in darkness and ends the same way. Your husband is not cruel, not the way stories say husbands can be. He doesn't hit you, doesn't scream, but his silence weighs more than any blow. When he does speak, it is with the same tone he uses to order firewood or inspect the oxen. You are another piece of property to manage, and some days you wonder if that makes things better or worse. Quirky tidbit. Some villages believed that if a woman baked bread without singing, the loaf would spoil. You hum softly when you need, not because you believe it, but because you need something to fill the silence. You bleed again, but this time, it doesn't stop. The first time it happens, you are scrubbing the floor. You stand too quickly, and the world narrows to a bright point. When your mother-in-law finds you, she frowns, as though you've spilled something on her best apron. You're sent to bed without supper, told to rest until you can be useful again. You lie on the straw mattress, watching the shadows crawl across the wall, and you think about the girl you were before all this, the one who caught frogs in the creek and dreamed of something more. You try to remember what she looked like, but all you see is a face blurred by smoke and memory. Your body eventually mends, or at least stops protesting. You rise again because no one else will feed the chickens or wash the linens. When you return to your chores, no one mentions the days you spent in bed. It's as if weakness is something to be ashamed of. Something better, left unacknowledged. Historians still debate whether women had any say in how their days unfolded, whether marriage gave them a measure of security or just a new set of walls. You've stopped wondering. The walls are real either way. One evening, you catch your reflection in a bucket of water. You look older than you remember. Your eyes are hollow, your mouth set in a line you recognize from your mother's face. You touch your cheek, half expecting it to feel different. It doesn't. Your husband begins to expect more of you. Not just the housework, but the duty no one speaks of directly. You learn to lie still, to keep your eyes on the rafters while he moves against you. You don't make a sound. Afterwards, he rolls away and falls asleep as if nothing has happened. You lie awake, counting the heartbeats that refuse to slow. Quirky fact: some midwives carried dried toad parts sewn into little pouches to help women conceive. Your mother-in-law gives you one, pressing it into your palm with a look that says, she'll be watching to see if it works. The weeks pass in a fog of repetition. You measure time by the way your skirts start to feel tighter around your waist. When you can no longer pretend, you tell your husband you're with child. He doesn't smile. He only nods, as if you finally fulfilled some unspoken obligation. Your mother-in-law fusses over you in her own pinched way. She scolds you for standing too long, for lifting anything heavier than a loaf of bread. But her eyes are brighter now. You suspect she's already imagining a grandson to carry the family name. Historians still argue whether medieval women felt joy when they learned they were pregnant, or only fear. You suspect it's both. Tangled so tightly, you can't separate them. The first months are a blur of nausea and bone-deep exhaustion. You try to keep up with your chores, but your body rebels. Your husband's patience grows thin. He doesn't say much, but the way he slams the door when he leaves in the morning is louder than any words. You dream often of your mother's hands, of the creek behind your childhood home, of a girl who was not yet a wife or a vessel or a ghost. You wake with the taste of those dreams still in your mouth, sweet and bitter all at once. Quirky tidbit. In some parishes, women were expected to confess all their impure thoughts before giving birth, as if the child could inherit their sins. You wonder if your baby will be born carrying all the things you never dared to say. As your belly swells, the house feels smaller. Every room seems to close around you. The cradle is set by the hearth, an empty promise you can't bring yourself to touch. One night, as the fire dies, you press a hand to your stomach and whisper a hope you don't entirely believe, that this child will be the start of something gentler, something that feels like life, not just endurance. And when you finally drift to sleep, you dream you are somewhere warm, somewhere safe, where no one calls you wife or mother, just your name, just you. You don't remember when the fear started to feel normal. It's just there now, like the damp in the corners of every room. You wake each morning with a backache and a heartbeat that never quite calms. Your hands have learned to keep working even when your mind floats elsewhere. Anywhere but here. Your belly grows heavy enough that you move differently, slower, more careful. You catch your breath sometimes when the baby shifts inside you, reminding you that soon your body will be asked to split itself open. No one explains what to expect. No one asks if you're ready. Your mother-in-law fusses over you more now, but her kindness feels like a ledger being balanced. She keeps a close eye on your meals, counts how many times you rest, adjusts the blankets in the cradle you still can't bring yourself to touch. You suspect she is cataloging every moment, ready to recite it if something goes wrong. Historians still argue whether medieval childbirth was seen as a miracle or a threat. You think it's both. A gamble everyone pretends to be comfortable with because they have no other choice. Your husband grows more distant the rounder you become. Some evenings, he doesn't come home until the moon has climbed past the chimney. Other nights, he sits in silence, staring into the fire as if it owes him something. You wonder if he feels trapped too. You wonder if he notices you at all. One morning, you wake to find the first pain already curling low in your belly. It's not the sharpness you expected, but a deep, grinding ache that makes it hard to stand. You press a hand to the cradle, just to steady yourself. You think about calling for help, but the idea of hearing your own voice break is worse than the pain. You spend the day pacing the narrow kitchen, counting your steps. 14 from the hearth to the door, 14 back again. Each contraction pulls you deeper into yourself until the world blurs around the edges. Quirky tidbit. Some midwives carried little wooden figurines in their pockets, tiny effigies of saints or ancestors, to hold against a laboring woman's skin. You wish you had one, if only for something to grip. When the midwife arrives, she doesn't speak much. She smells of sage and old wool. She presses her hand to your belly and nods, as if she's confirming something you already knew. This is going to hurt, more than anything has ever hurt. The hours stretch into something formless. You lose track of the light, the time, the people who drift in and out of the doorway. Your body becomes a furnace. Sweat pools in the hollow of your collarbone. Someone tries to wipe your brow, but you push the hand away. You want to do this alone, even if you can't say why. Historians still debate whether medieval women faced childbirth with stoicism or terror. You suspect both. You suspect there's no word big enough for how it feels to break and still keep going. When the baby finally comes, there is no triumphant cry, just silence. A hush so complete you think the world itself has stopped breathing. You turn your head to see the midwife wrapping a small, still shape in cloth the color of old bones. No one tells you it's over. They don't have to. The emptiness in your belly says enough. You close your eyes and wait for the relief that doesn't come. Your mother-in-law whispers a prayer. Your husband leaves the room without looking at you. Quirky fact: in some villages, a baby who died before baptism was buried at the crossroads, so its spirit wouldn't wander back home. You don't ask where they'll bury yours. You don't want to know. The next morning, you rise because there is no alternative. The chickens still need feeding. The floor still needs sweeping. Your hands move on their own, tracing the same patterns you've always known. Only now, everything feels muffled, as if you're moving through thick wool. Your husband doesn't speak to you about what happened. No one does. You are simply expected to heal, to try again, to resume the performance of a life. Historians still argue whether medieval motherhood was defined more by joy or by grief. You think grief leaves the deeper mark, even when you don't talk about it. Weeks pass. You learn to sleep again, though your dreams are filled with small, silent shapes. Sometimes you wake with your arms reaching for something that isn't there. One afternoon, while kneading dough, you feel it. The first flutter of hope you didn't expect to return. Not hope for more children or a softer marriage. Just the small, stubborn hope that you can still feel anything at all. You bury it deep. You can't afford to nurture it yet. Quirky tidbit? Some women planted rosemary near a child's grave, believing it would carry their memory into the next life. You wonder if the small sprig your mother-in-law tucked into the cradle will ever grow. You wash the sheets, scrub the floor, press your palm flat against the cool stone of the hearth. You promise yourself you will survive this, too. And when you close your eyes that night, you remember the girl you were before all of it. The one who once thought survival was the same as living. Maybe someday, you'll believe otherwise. The seasons change whether you notice them or not. Spring pushes frost from the fields, sends green shoots clawing up through the dirt. You watch it happen from the kitchen doorway, hands still red from scrubbing. The wind smells cleaner now, but inside you, nothing has thawed. Your body heals in its own slow, stubborn way. The bleeding stops. The soreness fades, but the emptiness remains, a quiet echo that follows you from room to room. You tell no one. In this place, grief is a private burden, not something you spill across the floor. Your husband grows impatient, as if your sadness is an inconvenience. He starts to expect you in his bed again. You comply because resisting would only make the nights longer. You stare at the beams overhead, counting knots in the wood, willing yourself not to feel anything. Historians still argue whether medieval wives felt any pleasure or only duty. You suspect it's like everything else. Something you endure because you must. The next time your belly swells, you keep it secret as long as you can. You move slower, cautious in a way that draws your mother-in-law's attention. She says nothing, but her eyes linger. When she finally asks, you nod without meeting her gaze. She exhales like she's been holding her breath for months. Quirky tidbit? Some households believed tying a red ribbon around a pregnant woman's waist would ward off miscarriages. You find a scrap of ribbon in a drawer and tie it there yourself, hidden beneath your shift. Not because you believe in magic, but because you have nothing else to believe in. This time, you don't hope aloud. You don't touch the cradle. You don't let yourself think of names. Each night, you press your hand over your womb and whisper nothing at all. Your body does what it must. The child comes in the dead of winter, when the wind slides under the door like a knife. The labor is long, but not as cruel. When the midwife lifts the baby, there is a sound, a thin, angry wail that feels like the first crack in the ice around your heart. It's a boy. Your husband's relief is so obvious it almost makes you laugh. Almost. They clean you up, wrap the child, place him in your arms. His skin is warm against yours, and you let yourself exhale for the first time in months. You survived. He survived. For now, that's enough. Historians still debate whether medieval women found joy in motherhood, or only more reasons to be afraid. You think it's both. Tangled so tight you can't pull them apart. Your mother-in-law smiles, a rare, brief thing, and tells you to rest. But rest is something you've forgotten how to do. Even in sleep, you dream of work waiting for you. The days blur together. You learn the sounds your son makes, the hunger cries, the fretful whimpers, the contented sighs. Your body, still raw and weary, learns how to nourish him. You marvel at the fact that after everything, you can still give life. Quirky fact: some women smeared honey on a newborn's lips to protect them from illness. You dab a drop on your son's mouth, just in case. You don't know if it will help, but it feels like an offering to whatever power might be listening. Your husband starts coming home earlier. He sits by the hearth, watching the baby, as if trying to memorize every feature. He doesn't speak to you much, but he doesn't have to. His satisfaction is a quiet pressure that fills every corner of the house. You return to your chores because no one else will. You carry water with one arm, your son strapped to your chest. You knead dough with your hips pressed against the table so you don't sway too much. You learn to work and mother in the same motion, never stopping long enough to wonder who you are when you're not doing either. Historians still argue whether women like you had any identity beyond wife and mother. You suspect that question misses the point. You are who you must be day after day, because no one else can be it for you. One afternoon, you catch your reflection in the bucket again. This time, the face that looks back doesn't surprise you. The hollows under your eyes, the set of your mouth, the streak of gray in your hair that arrived too soon. They all feel honest, like proof of something hard won. Your son grows stronger. He grips your finger with a fierceness that startles you. When he looks at you, you feel something almost like pride, almost like love without fear attached to it. Quirky tidbit: some believed babies born in winter were destined for hardship. You look at your son's determined scowl and decide he'll prove them wrong. At night, when the house is finally quiet, you sit by the hearth and hold him close. You trace the line of his cheek with a fingertip, memorizing every small detail. You tell yourself that no matter what else happens, he will know he was wanted, that you endured for him. The fire burns low. The wind rattles the shutters. Your husband snores behind you. And for the first time in a long while, you let yourself think that maybe, just maybe, you are not only surviving, you are beginning again. You wake before dawn, as always. The air in the cottage is so cold, it bites the skin of your arms when you slip out of the blankets. Your son stirs in the cradle, a soft whimper that hasn't yet grown into a full cry. You press your hand over his chest to feel the steady rise and fall, proof he is still here, still breathing. It feels like a small miracle every morning. You move quietly so you don't wake your husband. The fire has burned itself to ash. You crouch and coax it back to life, feeding it slivers of kindling until the glow returns. The light spills over the room, painting everything in a soft amber that almost looks kind. Your son is growing faster than you imagined. His eyes track your movements now. His hands bat at your hair when you lean too close. Some days, you swear he studies you the same way you once studied your mother, trying to understand what makes a woman carry so much and still keep moving. Historians still argue whether medieval women felt pride in motherhood or only weariness. You suspect they felt both at once, like two hands pressed to the same heartbeat. The village has begun to change around you. A new steward arrived with the Lord's retinue, a man with thin lips and a colder voice than winter. He speaks of taxes and obligations as if hunger isn't already gnawing at every household. You stand at the edge of the crowd when he talks, your son strapped to your chest, and feel something old and angry stirring in you. Quirky tidbit? Some villagers believed that if a tax collector stepped over your threshold, you had to offer him your best food. You wonder if that's why so many women started leaving their doors barred. Your husband listens to the steward's proclamations with a resigned nod. He doesn't speak against them, doesn't question. You wish you could understand that kind of quiet compliance. You wish you knew how to swallow your own fury without choking. At night, you and your husband barely talk. He comes to your bed sometimes, his hands clumsy with need. You lie still, counting the rafters, telling yourself it's only another task, another price you pay to keep the peace. When he leaves you in the darkness, you press your palm to your own belly and remember the hollow ache of the first child you buried. But then your son wakes, small, hungry, alive, and the ache softens. You feed him in the hush before dawn, his warm weight against your skin, reminding you why you haven't run yet, why you stay. One morning, your mother-in-law comes to visit. She inspects the cradle, the hearth, the wash tub. She doesn't find fault this time, but she doesn't smile either. "He'll need a brother," she says before she leaves. You watch her walk down the path, her back straight and unyielding. You feel the words settle in your chest like a stone. Historians still debate whether medieval women believed they had any choice in the size of their families. You think choice is a word invented by people who never had to barter their bodies for survival. That winter is long, colder than any you remember. Snow drifts against the cottage wall so high, you can barely open the door. Your husband spends his evenings in silence by the fire, his gaze fixed on nothing you can see. You think he is afraid, though he would never say it aloud. Quirky fact: some believed that if you swept your doorstep after dark, you'd invite misfortune into your home. You sweep anyway. The misfortune is already here, and you'd rather have a clean floor. Food runs low before the thaw comes. You ration every crust, every shriveled carrot. Some nights, you go without, so your son can eat. When you finally see green again, it feels like a promise you don't quite trust. And yet, life returns in small, stubborn ways. The hens start laying again. Your son learns to crawl. You catch yourself laughing once when he topples into a basket of rags. The sound startles you, as though it came from someone else. In the warmer months, women gather at the well again. You join them when you can, your son clinging to your skirts. The talk is always half whispers. Who's lost a child? Who's expecting? Who's been beaten? No one says these things outright, but everyone knows. The well is where truths surface, if only for a moment. One afternoon, a girl no older than 12 stands near the edge, her eyes wide and frightened. Her father is trying to marry her off to pay a debt. She doesn't speak, but you see it in the way she holds herself, like something cornered. You want to tell her it won't be so bad, but you can't lie to her. You can only meet her gaze and nod, as if to say, "I see you. I remember." Historians still argue whether these quiet alliances between women were forms of rebellion or simply survival. You think they were both. Your son's first steps come one morning as the sun spills across the threshold. He toddles toward you, arms outstretched, and you drop the basket of laundry without thinking. You gather him up, bury your face in his hair. For one breathless instant, the world feels like it might be something soft again. Quirky tidbit? Some believed a child's first shoes should be burned to prevent witches from stealing their spirit. You tuck your sons away in a chest instead. You can't bear to destroy them. At night, when the house is quiet, you sit by the fire and think of all the girls who will grow into women in this village. You wonder if your son will be a man who listens, who softens, who stays gentle. You don't know, but you will teach him what you can. You close your eyes and promise yourself that this will not be the end of your story, that you will not disappear into the cracks of someone else's life. You survived this far. You will not stop now. The first true warmth of spring feels almost suspicious. You open the door one morning, and the air is soft instead of sharp, smelling of thawing earth and old leaves. For a moment, you just stand there, your son balanced on your hip, letting the sun soak into your skin. He babbles something that sounds like a question. You answer with a smile you don't have to force. Your days take on a rhythm that feels almost bearable. You rise before dawn to stoke the fire, feed the chickens, knead the bread. Your son toddles after you, small fists clutching the hem of your skirt. He has learned how to laugh, a bright, bubbling sound that catches you off guard every time. You wonder if he knows how much it saves you. Your husband comes home later now, smelling of ale and smoke. You don't ask where he's been. You don't ask anything. You've learned the safest way to keep the peace is to let the questions die in your throat. He doesn't look at you the way he once did. He doesn't look at you much at all. You have learned how to slip through it unseen. You pull on your shawl and step into the yard. The earth is slick under your boots, but you welcome the feeling of something real pressing back against your soles. It reminds you that for all the things you have no say in, your body still belongs to you. The chickens are restless. You scatter the last of the grain, watching them scrabble and peck in the half-light. You think of your mother, her hands doing the same work, her face bent to the same small tasks. You wonder if she ever felt like more than a caretaker for other people's hungers. Historians still argue whether medieval women thought of themselves as individuals or simply as extensions of their families. You suspect the answer depends on the hour of the day, on whether anyone was watching. Inside, your son wakes with a small, hopeful cry. You lift him into your arms, pressing your cheek to the soft crown of his hair. He smells of sleep and the sweet, sour milk on his breath. You close your eyes and let yourself feel it, a pure, uncomplicated love that has nothing to do with duty. Your husband lingers longer in the mornings now. He sips his broth, stares at the wall, says nothing. You can't remember the last time he touched your hand. Some days you think you prefer it that way. Quirky tidbit? In some villages, it was believed that a husband's spirit could slip out through his mouth while he slept and wander. You wonder if that's why he looks so hollow when he wakes. After he leaves, you set your son on a blanket near the hearth and begin your chores. You clean and mend and stir. The same motions you've repeated so many times, they feel more natural than your own heartbeat. But today, something shifts. As you scrub the table, you think, I don't want this to be all I am. It isn't the first time you've had the thought, but it is the first time you don't turn away from it. Historians still debate whether peasant women had any ambitions beyond survival. You suspect ambition can look like many things: a hidden scrap of parchment, an extra handful of beans planted where no one will see. At midday, a neighbor comes with a bundle of herbs to trade. She is older than you by a decade, her hair streaked with iron. You don't know her well, but when you meet her gaze, you see the same weariness, the same unspoken question. Is this all there is? You trade without speaking much. Dried mint for a wedge of hard cheese, a scrap of linen for a bundle of nettle stems. When she leaves, she presses your hand briefly. It feels like the first real kindness you've been offered in weeks. Quirky fact? Some believe that if two women shared bread in silence, it bound them as sisters in spirit. You don't know if it's true, but the thought makes you smile. The steward comes again that afternoon. His eyes flick over the yard, the hearth, your face. He recites the new levies as though they are nothing, just another pinch of flesh taken from bodies already scraped to the bone. You nod because you must, but inside, something sours and hardens. After he leaves, you sit by the fire with your son in your lap. You stroke his hair, feeling the weight of everything you cannot protect him from. You tell yourself you will not let this place teach him that kindness is weakness, that survival means silence. When he falls asleep, you stand and look around the cottage. Every beam, every worn floorboard, every corner you've swept 1,000 times. You think of how many women came before you, and how many will come after, all of them bending their backs under the same invisible yoke. You touch the cradle with one hand, feeling the groove your palm has worn in the wood. You whisper to yourself, not a prayer exactly, but a promise. I will not vanish here, even if no one else ever knows my name. Historians still argue whether medieval women found strength in their faith, or only in themselves. You think both can be true. You think faith is sometimes just the shape hope takes when you can't afford to call it by its name. That evening, you knead dough while your son plays with a carved bit of wood. He holds it out to you, beaming as though he's offering a treasure. You take it and pretend to study it, your throat tightening. You realize suddenly that you don't want him to grow up watching you shrink. Quirky tidbit? In some households, mothers whispered secrets into their children's ears before bed, believing the words would take root in their hearts. You start doing the same. You tell him stories of brave girls and clever women, and endings that don't end in sorrow. You tuck him into the cradle as the last of the light fades. You press a kiss to his cheek and think, maybe this is how it begins. Not with a rebellion anyone else can see, but with a quiet refusal to stop dreaming. Later, as you lie beside your husband, you let yourself imagine a future where your son learns to speak his truth without fear, where your daughter, if you have one, never learns to flinch when a man raises his voice. You drift to sleep with your hand over your heart, as though you can hold the promise there. And in the darkness, you feel something like peace. The mornings grow warmer as spring leans into summer, though inside the cottage, the chill never quite leaves. You wake before the first birds call, your body rising out of sleep as if it never learned how to stay down for long. Your son is already stirring, small hands batting at the blanket. You lift him into your arms and carry him to the hearth, pressing your cheek against his hair. His warmth is the closest thing to comfort you know. You start the fire and move through the motions of your chores. Sweep the floor, fetch water, knead dough. Each task is a tether that keeps you anchored to the life you didn't choose, but have learned to claim, piece by piece. Historians still argue whether medieval women ever felt a sense of ownership over their lives. You suspect it comes in moments, brief and bright, a fleeting thought. This is mine, before the world reminds you it never really was. Your husband leaves early most days, off to help mend the Lord's fences or tend the steward's pigs. You don't ask what he thinks about while he works. You don't ask what he feels when he comes home. You suspect the answer is the same as yours, less than he hoped. Quirky tidbit? In some villages, people believed that when a man died away from home, a small part of him returned each night to sit by his own hearth. You wonder how many wives spent evenings feeling haunted without knowing why. The steward comes again, this time with a letter sealed in red wax. Your hands tremble as you take it. You can't read well, but you know enough to catch the shape of the words. More taxes, more demands. You wait until he leaves before you let yourself exhale. When you look up, your son is watching you, wide-eyed. You force a smile and ruffle his hair, though your heart feels heavy as wet wool. Later, when he naps, you hide the letter under the hearthstone, as if burying it there will make it less true. That afternoon, the baker's wife comes by. She is carrying her youngest on her hip, her shoulders rounded with the same tiredness you feel in your own bones. You trade a bundle of nettle and 2 eggs for a small loaf of bread. She doesn't linger, but before she leaves, she touches your arm. It is not pity, just recognition. You think of all the women who have lived this same story, the same kitchens, the same bruised hopes, the same fierce love for children who will grow up never knowing the cost of being born. Historians still debate whether the bonds between women in medieval villages were strong enough to make a difference. You think they were the only thing that ever did. At dusk, your husband returns, slower than usual. He looks at you as if he wants to say something but can't shape the words. You ladle broth into a bowl and set it before him. He eats without meeting your eyes. You wonder if he resents you for the life he feels chained to. You wonder if you resent him back. Quirky fact: some households believed if you looked into a well at sunset, you'd see the face of your true love. You think of all the girls who must have peered into the water and hoped for someone kinder than what they were given. After supper, you carry your son outside, settling on the rough bench beside the door. The sky is deep blue, streaked with the last color of day. He babbles and points to the stars as they appear, one by one. You name them for him, though you don't know their proper names, just the ones your mother used. The hunter, the maiden, the lost child. He giggles when you call the biggest star his. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the night breeze cool your face. It smells of damp grass and distant smoke. It smells like the end of something, though you can't say what. Inside, your husband shifts restlessly. You can hear the scrape of his chair on the floor, the low sigh he thinks you can't hear. You wonder if he feels the same invisible weight pressing down, year after year. You wonder if that's the only thing you share anymore. When you go back in, you find your son asleep in your arms, his head resting in the hollow of your collarbone. You tuck him into the cradle and sit beside it, your hand on the worn edge of the wood. You stay there long after the room has gone dark. Historians still argue whether medieval women ever dreamed of running away. You think the better question is whether they ever stopped dreaming, even when they stayed. Quirky tidbit? Some believed a woman who slept with a sprig of mugwort under her pillow would dream true visions of the future. You press a sprig into the space beneath your mattress, just in case. That night, you dream of a road stretching into a dawn you've never seen. You are walking it alone, your son in your arms. No weight on your shoulders, but his small, steady heartbeat. You wake with tears on your cheeks and no shame for them. Before you rise, you whisper a promise into the darkness. I will not forget who I am. You step into the day feeling something you haven't in years, a sense that the story isn't over, that maybe, quietly, it has just begun. The dawn creeps in soft and gray, settling on your skin like a question you're too tired to answer. You wake before your husband and son, as you always do. Your body moves on its own, stepping into the cold without protest. You know every board that will groan, every stone that will turn beneath your heel. It's a strange comfort to belong so fully to a place that will never belong to you. You light the fire and warm the milk, listening to the cottage breathe. Your son stirs in his cradle, small fists batting the air. You lift him into your arms, pressing your nose to the curve of his neck. He smells of sleep and raw potential, a reminder that some things have not yet hardened into resignation. Your husband wakes slower. He sits by the hearth, rubbing the sleep from his eyes without looking at you. You set a bowl of broth at his place, your hands steady, even as something inside you tenses. He says nothing. You have long since stopped expecting anything else. Historians still argue whether medieval women found comfort in routine or simply lost themselves in it. You suspect the answer depends on the day. Outside, the village is stirring. The steward's men have returned, this time with a wagon and 3 scribes in ill-fitting cloaks. They set up a makeshift table near the chapel and begin reading names from a ledger. You watch from the threshold, your son balanced on your hip, and feel the old, familiar dread press behind your ribs. Quirky tidbit? Some believed that if a tax collector wrote your name in red ink, you were cursed to poverty for 7 generations. You glance at the ink pot on the steward's table and think it looks suspiciously crimson. When they call your husband forward, he goes without a word. You see the line of his shoulders, the way he stands, as if bracing for a blow. You wonder when he became so small in your eyes. You wonder when you did. You wait until he returns, his face gray. He nods once and passes you the slip of parchment. Twice the levy from last season? You read the sum and feel your mouth go dry. You think about the stores you've hidden behind the chicken coop, the little stash of coins wrapped in cloth under the hearthstone. You think about how little it matters. Your son tugs at your sleeve, sensing the tension even if he can't name it. You smooth his hair back and press a kiss to his crown. You tell yourself he will never see the inside of this ledger, that you will find a way to spare him this weight. Historians still debate whether women believed in luck or simply needed to. You decide belief is as necessary as bread when the world wants you hungry. After the scribes leave, the women gather near the well. You join them, your heart thudding in your throat. No one says what they're thinking, that none of you can pay, that something will break before the season turns. The baker's wife is the first to speak, her voice raw. "We can't keep doing this," she says. And in that moment, you love her for saying it out loud. The others murmur agreement. You stand there, your son on your hip, and realize you are not alone in your anger. Quirky fact? Some believed a well could steal your secrets if you looked into it too long. You stare into the water anyway, daring it to take this truth. I am done being silent. That evening, you knead bread with a ferocity that leaves your hand shaking. Your husband watches, but doesn't speak. Your son toddles around the room, giggling as though the air isn't thick with unspoken words. You envy him that innocence. You envy him everything he has not yet learned to fear. Later, after the house has gone quiet, you slip outside. You walk past the coop, past the little garden plot, to the place behind the old fence where the nettles grow wild. You kneel in the dirt and bury the parchment with the tax notice under a flat stone. You tell yourself, it isn't surrender. It's a line you will not cross until someone makes you. Historians still argue whether women's defiance ever changed anything. You think it does, even if no one writes it down. When you return, your husband is asleep. You watch him for a moment, wondering what he dreams about, if he dreams at all. You think of the first night you shared this bed, the way your heart had raced with dread. You think of the way your son curls into your side now, and how that same space has become something almost tender. Quirky tidbit? In some places, wives whispered curses into their husbands' ears while they slept, believing the words would slip into their dreams and soften them. You lean close, but you don't speak. You have no curses left to give. Instead, you slip into bed and pull your son close, your hand resting over his small, steady heart. You close your eyes and imagine the dawn. How it will come whether you are ready or not. How it will rise on the same debts, the same hunger, the same small moments of stolen grace. You promise yourself that tomorrow you will find a way to be more than this, that you will not let the ledger be the only record of your life. You drift to sleep with that promise held tight in your chest, a secret too fierce to name. The morning comes thick with fog, a damp weight that presses against your skin as you step into the yard. The chickens are restless, feathers ruffled as though they too can sense something unsettled. You scatter what little grain remains and watch them pick at it, your breath clouding in the cold. Inside, your husband sits hunched over the table, staring at the same slip of parchment you buried behind the fence. He must have found it while you slept. He doesn't look up when you enter. The silence stretches between you like a rope pulled too tight. Your son toddles across the floor, his small hands grasping for the edge of the table. He doesn't know yet that the world can take more than it ever gives back. You envy him that ignorance. You envy him the soft roundness of his cheeks, untouched by worry. Historians still argue whether medieval mothers believed they could protect their children from the weight of the world. You know the answer. They believed it because they had to. You knead the bread as the dawn brightens, feeling every crack in your knuckles. Your husband finally speaks, voice hoarse. They'll come for it. He doesn't say what it means: coin, grain, labor, maybe all of it. You keep your eyes on the dough and say nothing. Quirky tidbit. Some villages held pity feasts, where families too poor to pay levies were fed scraps in front of their neighbors, so no one could pretend they were blameless. You think you'd rather starve quietly than sit in that circle of shame. By noon, the fog lifts, revealing the steward's men walking the lanes with their ledger and a fresh roll of parchment. You stand behind your door, heart hammering. Your son hides behind your skirt, sensing your fear without understanding it. When the knock comes, you don't answer. You wait, holding your breath until the footsteps fade away. After they leave, you step outside to find a small mark scrawled in chalk above your door. A symbol you don't recognize, but you understand the meaning. You are seen. You are known. You will be remembered, though not kindly. You scrub at it with the heel of your palm until your skin stings, and the chalk is a faint smear. Your husband doesn't help. He just watches you with the same tired resignation you see in your own reflection. Historians still debate whether defiance in women was punished more harshly than in men. You suspect it was, not because it was rarer, but because it was more frightening. That evening, you gather what you can spare: 2 eggs, a scrap of salted pork, a bundle of nettles, and walk to the baker's house. Her husband has been sick for weeks, and you know the steward will be there soon enough. When she opens the door, her eyes are red from crying. You press the bundle into her hands without speaking. She pulls you into a hug, and for a moment, you are not alone in your hunger. Quirky fact: some women wore sprigs of rosemary pinned to their aprons to keep envy at bay. You tuck a bit behind your collar before you leave, not because you believe it, but because hope needs something to hold. On the way home, you pass the chapel. The new priest stands in the doorway, watching you with an expression you can't read. He is younger than the last one, soft-cheeked and careful with his words. When he nods in greeting, you don't return it. Inside, Your husband sits by the hearth. He doesn't ask where you've been. You set the empty basket on the table and begin to mend the tear in your son's only good tunic. The needle bites your thumb, a tiny pain that feels almost welcome. Later, when the boy has gone to sleep, your husband clears his throat. If the steward comes again, he stops. You look up and meet his eyes, something passing between you that is not quite forgiveness, not quite blame, just the shared knowledge that neither of you knows how to fix this. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages softened over time or hardened like old bread. You suspect both, depending on the day. Quirky tidbit? Some women brewed poppy tea to dull their husbands' tempers and their own despair. You think of the poppies drying in the rafters and decide you will save them for worse days. That night, you dream of walking through the village in a dress as red as blood. No one stops you. No one dares. You wake with the taste of power on your tongue and wish you could carry it into daylight. At dawn, you lift your son from his cradle and press him close. His hair smells of smoke and sleep. "We will find a way," you whisper, though you don't know what it means. He babbles a word that sounds like "mama," and you pretend it's an answer. You set him down, watching as he crawls to the hearth, his small hands steady on the stones. You think he will grow up in this place, but he will not be of it. You think, I will teach him to want more. When your husband emerges from the bedroom, you nod to him. You break the last of the bread and set half at his place, half at yours. You eat in silence, but it feels less like surrender than it did yesterday. You look out the window, past the fields, past the hedgerows, and for the first time, you allow yourself to imagine a future neither of you has been promised. You close your eyes and taste it. Something like hope, something like defiance, and you decide that today it will be enough. The sun rises thick and golden, pouring over the thatch roof and making the yard look almost beautiful. You stand in the doorway for a moment, your son balanced on your hip, and let the light warm your face. He giggles, pressing sticky fingers against your cheek. You close your eyes and think, this, at least, is real. You set him down in the patch of dirt where the first green shoots are pushing through. He pats the seedlings with the solemn concentration of a priest blessing the dead. You smile despite everything. Some days, he feels like the only good thing you've made. Inside, your husband is awake, sitting at the table with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He hasn't said much since the steward's last visit. You suspect he's hoping the silence will protect him. You suspect he's wrong. Historians still argue whether medieval men felt shame for what they could not provide. You suspect the shame was there, gnawing under every quiet meal and every slammed door. You knead the bread while he watches, the dough rising under your palms. You remember your mother's hands doing the same work. You remember how they cracked and bled in the winter. You wonder if she also thought about running every time she folded the loaves into the fire's heat. Quirky tidbit? Some believed that if you turned bread 3 times before baking, it would never burn, no matter how distracted you became. You do it anyway, even though you know better. Your son crawls across the floor, his small fingers brushing against your skirts. He has learned to pull himself up on the bench, and today he tries to climb onto it. You catch him before he falls, and for an instant, You feel something warm bloom behind your ribs. You kiss the crown of his head and set him down again. The morning drags on, every hour thick with waiting. You know the steward will return. You know this time there will be no more warnings. When the knock finally comes, it is so gentle it almost breaks you. You open the door to find him standing there, hands folded behind his back. He is not alone. 2 men stand just behind him, their eyes sliding past you into the room, measuring how much can be taken. He clears his throat and says your husband's name. Your husband steps forward, head bowed. The steward unrolls a parchment and begins to speak, but you don't hear the words. All you hear is your own heart, beating so loud it drowns out everything else. Historians still debate whether medieval women ever stepped between their husbands and the men who came to collect. You don't think it matters. In the end, someone always pays. When the steward finishes, he looks at you as if expecting an apology. You say nothing. You stand perfectly still while your husband signs the paper, while the men step past you to take the cask of barley and the last of the cured meat. When they leave, the house feels lighter in a way that has nothing to do with relief. Quirky fact? Some believed that if you whispered a curse into the threshold as a collector crossed it, he would never prosper again. You whisper it now, quietly, as you close the door. Your husband sinks into the chair, his face a gray mask. Your son tugs at your skirt, oblivious. You lift him and hold him close, breathing in the smell of him until your heart slows. Later, you walk the edges of the field, your son strapped to your hip. The sky is wide and blue. The wind moves through the rye like a hand smoothing tangled hair. You stand there a long time, feeling the weight of your own life pressing down, and you think, if I do not bend, I will break. You go back inside. You sit at the table. You take your husband's hand. He looks at you as if he has forgotten who you are. You squeeze once and let go. You have no words left to give him. All you have is your presence, and you aren't sure it is enough. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages were partnerships or prisons. You think sometimes they were both. That evening, you light every candle in the house. Your husband watches you without speaking. You set your son on your lap and begin to tell a story, not a psalm, not a lesson, just a story about a girl who learned to speak to the wind, about how the wind listened. Quirky tidbit? Some believed the wind could carry your prayers to places you'd never see. You don't know if it's true, but tonight, you pretend it is. Your son listens with wide eyes. Your husband's gaze softens. For 1 hour, you are just a family. You are not debtors. You are not failures. You are not the tally marks in a stranger's ledger. When the candles burn low, you kiss your son's hair and carry him to bed. You watch him sleep, one hand curled under his cheek. You think, I will teach you how to survive this world without becoming hard. You lie down beside your husband. You do not touch. You do not speak. But for the first time in a long while, you do not feel alone. And in that small mercy, you find something like hope. You wake to a hush so deep it feels like the world is holding its breath. The sky beyond the shutter is a flat, bruised gray. Rain is coming, you think? You can almost taste it, cold and metallic on your tongue. Your son is still asleep in the cradle, one small hand curled in a fist near his mouth. You smooth his hair and whisper a blessing you don't remember learning. just something your mother used to murmur over you. It feels like a ritual older than language. Your husband is already gone. He left before dawn to work in the steward's fields. Another demand, another debt to repay. You didn't hear him go. You wonder if that's a kindness or a symptom of how little you expect from each other now. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages were built on love or necessity. You think love is something you discover in tiny moments, if you're lucky. But mostly you survive on necessity. You knead the bread with more force than you need. The dough resists you, stubborn and elastic, and you think, if only my life could be shaped this easily. You press your palms into it until your shoulders ache. When the rain finally comes, it falls in a steady, drumming rhythm that drowns out every other sound. You open the door and stand under the lintel, feeling the spray on your face. Your son toddles to your side and reaches one chubby hand into the downpour, shrieking with delight when the drops spatter his skin. You laugh, really laugh, and for a moment you feel lighter than you have in months. Quirky tidbit? Some villagers believed the first rainfall after midsummer carried blessings if you stood in it bareheaded. You step into the yard and tilt your face up, letting the water soak your hair. Your son claps and squeals. You let him believe you are playing, not praying. Inside, you dry him by the hearth, his damp curls plastered to his forehead. You think, he will never remember this day. But I will. You hold him close until he squirms to be set down. Later, when the rain tapers off, you wrap your shawl around your shoulders and walk to the edge of the fields. Everything smells of wet earth and green things. You watch the wind comb ripples through the rye and imagine it carrying your worries away. You know better, but you pretend anyway. Historians still debate whether medieval women ever found peace in moments like this. You think they must have? If only because no one can survive without a little softness. When you return, the steward's clerk is waiting by your door. He is a small man with narrow shoulders and eyes that never quite meet yours. He carries a ledger tucked under one arm, and you hate that you know exactly what it contains. He clears his throat and informs you that more grain will be required this season. Something about shortages, about obligations to the new lord. You stand there, your face calm, while inside you feel something begin to splinter. Quirky fact? In some villages, women spat on the steward's shadow for luck after he left. You wait until he turns his back, then do it too. Just in case. You close the door and sink onto the bench. Your son crawls into your lap, pressing his cheek against your chest as though he can sense your turmoil. You wrap your arms around him and rest your chin on the soft curve of his head. When your husband comes home, he doesn't ask what happened. You suspect he already knows. You sit together in silence until the last of the daylight fades. That night, you light a single candle and unroll the scrap of parchment you've hidden under the hearthstone, your own ledger, though no one else would call it that. Just a list of small debts and trades, promises given and received. At the bottom, you've started writing a second list. All the things you will not surrender. Your son's laughter, the stories your mother taught you, the knowledge of which herbs heal and which can harm, your own name, spoken aloud in the dark. Historians still argue whether medieval women understood the power of naming things. You know they did. It's how you keep hold of what is yours. You add another line. I will not be afraid forever. When you blow out the candle, the darkness feels less like an enemy and more like a witness. Quirky tidbit? Some believed that if you whispered a secret into a clay jar and buried it under the hearth, it would stay safe until you were ready to claim it. You think of all the words you have swallowed, all the things you might still say. You lie beside your husband in the narrow bed, your son breathing softly in his cradle. You think, I am not finished. The thought is so sudden and fierce that it almost frightens you. You press a hand over your heart, feeling the beat of it, steady and stubborn. You think of the rain, of the way it fell on your upturned face. You think of the rye bending under the wind and how it rose again when the gusts passed. You close your eyes and whisper to the darkness, I will rise again too. And in the quiet that follows, you believe it. The sun comes late and thin through the shutters, a cold light that makes the cracks in the walls look deeper. You lie still for a long time, your hand resting over your ribs, feeling the slow thump of your own heart. Some mornings you wake and wonder how it keeps going, how you keep going. But you do. Your son stirs first, rolling toward you with a sleepy murmur. You lift him into your arms, breathing in the scent of his hair. He will never know how much you have sacrificed to keep him warm. You hope he never has to learn. Your husband is already gone, his absence leaving a hollow in the room that feels bigger than it should. You think you might prefer it this way. Just you and the boy, the hush of the early hour. You can almost pretend the rest of the world has nothing to do with you. Historians still argue whether medieval women found solace in solitude or only loneliness. You think the difference lies in whether you chose it. You rise and begin the day's work. Bread, washing, gathering herbs before the rain comes again. Your hands move without thought, practiced as breathing. You measure your life in these repetitions, and for the first time, you wonder if that could be a kind of strength. Quirky tidbit? Some women believed the first herbs picked at dawn had the most power, whether to heal or to hex. You tuck a sprig of yarrow into your pocket, just in case you decide which you need it for. By midday, the sky bruises purple and green, heavy with the promise of a storm. You pull your shawl tighter and step outside to bring in the drying linens. Over the hedgerow, you see the steward's clerk trudging along the path, his cloak snapping in the wind. Your pulse picks up. You look down at your son, playing in the dust with a stick, oblivious to how everything can change with a single knock. The clerk stops at your gate. He clears his throat, but you don't ask him in. You stand there, your jaw set, waiting for him to finish the errand he surely resents as much as you do. He unrolls his parchment and reads in a thin, apologetic voice. A new tithe, more grain, and a warning that further delays will bring consequence. He says it all without meeting your eyes, and you wonder if he has a wife somewhere who waits for him to come home, empty-handed and ashamed. You nod once when he's done, though you don't promise anything. He leaves without pressing for more. Historians still debate whether peasant women were truly powerless or simply expected to pretend they were. You suspect it was the latter. You suspect that's why you feel so tired. When you go back inside, your son climbs onto your lap. You hold him tighter than usual. He presses a damp kiss to your cheek. It feels like absolution. Quirky fact? Some believed that kissing a child's forehead before bed would bind their soul to yours forever. You decide you'll do it every night, just to be sure. That evening, you boil nettle and barley into a thin soup. Your husband comes home late, shoulders slumped, eyes dull. He doesn't ask, "What happened?" You don't offer. The two of you sit in silence as the wind rattles the shutters. You think how strange it is to be so close to someone and feel so far away. When your son falls asleep, you lift him to your shoulder and sway in the dim light. You whisper stories into his hair, of women who walked away from their cages, of girls who learned the names of every star. You don't know if he understands, but the telling comforts you. Later, you tuck him into the cradle. Your husband has already turned to the wall. You watch his back for a moment, wondering what he dreams of. You suspect it's not you? Historians still argue whether medieval wives loved their husbands or merely endured them. You decide that endurance is its own form of love, though no one writes songs about it. You step outside before sleep, needing the cool air. The storm has broken at last, and the yard glistens with rain. You stand barefoot in the mud and tilt your head back, letting the droplets kiss your face. For a moment, you feel clean. Quirky tidbit? Some believed stormwater collected from the eaves could heal sorrow if you drank it before dawn. You cup your hands and sip, the taste cold and metallic. You don't know if it will help, but you want it to. When you go back inside, you find your son has shifted in his sleep, one small arm reaching toward your empty place in the bed. You lie beside him, curling around the shape of his warmth. You think, "I am not finished." You think, "They will not take everything." And when you close your eyes, the darkness feels less like an ending and more like a pause. The dawn breaks pale and cold, a thin light creeping across the rafters. You lie there with your eyes open, listening to the sound of your son's breathing. Steady, untroubled. For a moment, you pretend it is enough. You rise slowly, feeling every ache in your bones, every bruise that never quite fades. You move through the quiet house, touching each familiar thing as if to remind yourself it's still yours. The cradle, the chipped bowl, the shawl your mother spun from the last of her good wool. Some mornings, you have to count these small reliances to keep yourself from unraveling. Historians still argue whether medieval women believed they owned anything outright. You know the truth. You own what you can hold on to, what you can keep others from taking. Your husband wakes with a groan, rubbing the back of his neck. He doesn't look at you. You set bread on the table, the last of the hard heel you saved from yesterday. He breaks it in half without speaking. You eat in silence, your son babbling nonsense between you like a soft barrier neither of you is willing to cross. After the meal, he leaves again. The steward has ordered the men to mend a collapsed wall near the barley fields. You watch him walk away, his back bent as if he's already carrying the stones. You wonder if he ever remembers how young you both were when you married, how full of fear and something that almost passed for hope. Quirky tidbit? Some believed that if you sprinkled salt in your husband's boots, he'd always return home to you. You have never tried it. You're not sure you would. By mid-morning, you gather your son to walk the lanes. The sky is brittle blue, promising another hard frost before spring. You pass the steward's men repairing the wall. Your husband, among them. He doesn't see you. You keep walking. At the far end of the village, you find the baker's wife tending a small patch of leeks. Her hands are cracked and red, but she smiles when she sees you. She lifts your son into her arms, kissing his cheek. For a few minutes, you stand there, talking about nothing, about weather, about how the chickens have stopped laying, about which herbs might coax a weak stomach back to strength. It feels almost like friendship. Almost. Historians still debate whether these small alliances between women ever changed anything. You believe they did. You believe it's the only reason you're still here. You trade a handful of dried nettle for a scrap of soft cheese. Your son claps his hands at the sight of it. You hold it high and say, "Later," and he laughs as if you've promised him the world. Quirky fact? Some believed a child's laughter could ward off evil spirits. You think maybe it's true? Because when he laughs, you feel stronger. The afternoon drags. You scrub the floors, mend a tear in your only good dress, feed your son small bites of the cheese you meant to save. When he finally naps, you sit by the window, your hands resting on your knees. You don't cry. You have learned how to keep your tears for times when no one can hear them. As dusk falls, you light the hearth. Your husband returns, face pinched with cold, and sits without speaking. You ladle broth into a cracked bowl and place it in front of him. He nods once, and for a heartbeat, it almost feels like gratitude. You eat together, your son drowsy against your shoulder. You think, this is not happiness, but it is survival. And tonight, that feels close enough. After the meal, your husband goes to bed. You stay awake, mending a frayed sleeve by candlelight. When the house is finally silent, you lift your son from his cradle and hold him close. His hair smells of wood smoke and milk. You whisper into the soft hollow of his neck, "You will have more than this." Historians still argue whether medieval mothers dared to hope for their children. You know you do. You know it is the only thing that keeps your heart beating. You stand and step outside, the night air biting your cheeks. The sky is clear, a spill of stars brighter than you've ever seen them. For a moment you feel so small it almost breaks you. And then you remember. Small things endure. Small things survive when the grand ones fall. Quirky tidbit? Some women buried a sprig of rosemary at their door to keep the future gentle. You bend and tuck one into the frozen earth, pressing it down with your bare palm. You straighten and look back at your house. You think of all the nights you have stood here, wondering how you would go on. You think of all the mornings you have woken up and done it anyway. When you slip back inside, you carry the cold with you, like a promise. You tuck your son under the blankets, pressing one last kiss to his cheek. You lie down beside your husband, though you don't reach for him. You don't need to. You have your own quiet faith to keep you warm. And as your eyes close, you think, I am still here. I am still. The dawn comes slow, a thin silver creeping over the rafters, catching on the wool blanket draped over your shoulders. You sit up carefully, feeling the dull ache in your hips, the stiffness in your knees. These are familiar pains now, like old neighbors you've learned to nod to in passing. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and rest your bare feet on the cold floor, letting the chill wake the last corners of your mind. Your son is still asleep, one small hand flung across the pillow. You press your fingers lightly to the warm crease of his neck, as if to reassure yourself he is real, that this quiet moment is real. Your husband stirs, but does not open his eyes. You think that in his dreams, he must be somewhere else, somewhere better. You don't begrudge him that. Historians still argue whether medieval women knew the feeling of resignation more intimately than any other. You suspect they did. You suspect you do. You move through the morning routine with careful precision. Bread, water, kindling split into neat stacks. Your son wakes and toddles to your skirts, clinging there as if he senses some invisible current in the air. You smooth his hair and whisper the same promise you give him every morning. Today, we will keep going. Quirky tidbit? Some believed if you traced a circle around your child's crib with ash before dawn, no ill luck could cross it. You have done it every morning since he was born. You do it again now, though you no longer believe it keeps danger out. Perhaps it just keeps hope in. You step outside to fetch water, your breath billowing in the cold. The village is hushed, doors still shut against the last threads of night. The air smells of damp soil and old wood smoke. You stand there for a long moment, pail in hand, watching the first birds flit along the fence line. You wonder if they feel the weight of surviving, or if they simply do it without thinking. By midday, the steward's clerk appears again, this time with a different expression. A kind of uneasy respect that unsettles you more than disdain ever did. He hands you a folded scrap of parchment. Your hands do not shake as you take it. Inside, you read the message twice. A decree from the Lord's mother. You are to oversee a gathering of the women each fortnight, part instruction, part confession, part inventory. You don't know whether to laugh or weep. You suppose it was only a matter of time before your small defiance became something they wanted to manage. Your husband reads the note over your shoulder. His mouth tightens, but he says nothing. Your son claps his hands, mistaking the tension for excitement. You lift him into your arms and press your cheek to his soft hair, closing your eyes. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant women were truly powerless or simply ignored until their usefulness became obvious. You think both can be true. That evening, the baker's wife arrives, her face wary. She has received the same summons. Together, you sit by the fire and share a crust of bread, neither of you saying the thing you both know, that this is not a kindness. It is a leash. Quirky fact: some believed if you braided 3 strands of nettle into your hair before speaking with an official, you'd be protected from lies. You consider trying it. You consider whether it matters. After she leaves, you gather your son into your lap. The wind howls against the shutters, rattling the latch. You feel the old fear crawl up your spine, but you breathe through it. You are tired of letting it win. You begin to plan. You think about what you might teach, what you might dare to say if the steward's scribes are listening. You wonder if you could slip other things between the prayers and the rote lessons. Stories of women who built something lasting out of nothing, who refused to bow their heads forever. You tuck your son into his cradle and watch him sleep, his breath soft and even. You remember your mother's voice in the darkness, telling you that every generation thinks it has reached the end of what can be endured, and every generation is wrong. Historians still debate whether peasant mothers truly believed their daughters would have better lives. You know you must believe it. because otherwise you wouldn't be able to keep rising each morning. You lie down beside your husband, your body curved toward the cradle. You close your eyes and think of the field in high summer, the tall rye whispering secrets you still can't quite catch. You imagine your son running there one day, free in a way you never were. You think, let this be the beginning. Let this be enough. The night settles around you like a heavy quilt, pressing every thought into softness. You lie still in the dark, listening to the hush that follows a day's labor. No shouting, no footsteps, just the slow, unhurried quiet of a house that has finally exhaled. The last embers in the hearth pulse with a low orange glow, barely enough to cast a shadow. You trace their shape with your eyes, remembering how many nights you have sat here, watching the fire fade. You have learned that this hour holds a kind of truth, one that only emerges when all other voices go silent. Your son shifts in his sleep, a tiny sigh escaping his lips. You reach out, brushing the back of your fingers across his warm cheek. The gesture is as old as memory itself. For a moment, you let yourself believe that he will never have to carry what you have carried, that the world might grow kinder by the time he learns how to meet it on his own feet. You draw a slow breath, tasting the air, smoke, wool, a trace of damp earth clinging to the threshold. Familiar scents. You think, this is my life, not a grand story, not a legend anyone will write down, just a collection of small, stubborn moments strung end to end. You have learned to find the shape of yourself in those moments. Somewhere beyond the shutter, the wind stirs the thatch. It is not an angry wind, not tonight. Just a soft current, weaving through the beams, brushing your hair where it spills across the pillow. You close your eyes and imagine that it carries voices. Women who lived in cottages like yours, whose hands pressed bread into shape, who sang their children to sleep with the same tired melody. You hear them in your thoughts, not scolding, not praising, simply bearing witness, a quiet reminder that you are part of something older than fear, older than debt, older than all the heavy silences that have ever filled this room. You think about all the days you wanted to run, all the dawns when you doubted you could rise again. Yet here you are. Here you remain. There is power in that, though no one will thank you for it. You have learned not to expect thanks. You have learned to measure worth by different weights. Beneath your palm, your son's heartbeat thrums steady as the tide. You focus on that sound, letting it anchor you in the dark. The world can take many things, but it cannot take this small, defiant proof that you endured, and you gave something gentle back to the earth. You shift on the straw mattress, feeling the day's aches begin to ease. Your body is tired, but it is still yours. That counts for something. You have fed it. You have kept it alive. You have walked through the worst of seasons, and you have not surrendered. Let your thoughts drift now. Let them wander down the old paths you know so well, past the hedgerows heavy with berries in late summer, past the well where you learned your mother's songs, past the churchyard where you laid down what could not be saved. Let them keep going until they find the meadow you sometimes dream of, where no one asks anything of you at all. There, you can breathe. There, you can remember what it feels like to be only yourself, no one's possession, no one's ledger entry, no one's measure of obedience. In the morning, the fire will need tending. The bread will need kneading. The same old worries will knock at your door, patient as ever. But tonight, only tonight, you do not have to answer them. You can rest. You can trust that dawn will come, whether you are ready or not. And when it does, you will rise again, because that is what you do. That is who you are. Sleep now. Sleep without apology. You have earned the quiet